Welcome to this episode of Unraveling Adoption, an intentional space to delve into adoption's complexities together. I'm Beth Syverson. I'm an adoptive mom of a vibrant and insightful 19-year-old son, Joey, who is still struggling to find his path. I am walking beside him while working on my own personal growth and healing. We are committed to helping anyone touched by adoption, and we want to help the general public understand adoption's complexities better too. Today's guest is Jennifer Dyan Ghoston, the dulcet-toned host of the podcast Once Upon a Time in Adoptee Land. Her podcast gives adoptees a platform to share their relinquishment and adoption journeys. And occasionally, she even has adoptive parents like me on her show. She is a Chicago-born, same-race domestic adoptee, raised with loving adoptive parents in a closed adoption, and she's in reunion with biological family members. For 24 years, she had a career as a detective in the Chicago Police Department. Her self-published memoir is called The Truth So Far, A Detective's Journey to Reunite with Her Birth Family. She was featured in Gene Strauss's film documentary, A Simple Piece of Paper, which tells a story of 16 adoptees as they open their newly released original birth certificates after Illinois unsealed adoptees' records in 2011. Jennifer is a dynamic presence in the adoption community, advocating for openness and honesty, amplifying adoptee voices, and sharing a warm smile with everyone she meets. I'm so glad I know you, Jennifer. Thank you so much for being on Unraveling Adoption.
Thank you, Beth, for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Well, as an adoptive parent, I feel like one of the best things I can do is, and this is what I encourage other adoptive parents to do as well, is to listen to other adult adoptees tell their stories. So I want to start by hearing whatever parts of your adoption story you'd like to share with us.
Sure. So like you said, I'm a same-race domestic adoptee born in Chicago in 1964. Closed system. Adoption was closed. Everything was sealed. And so I was in foster care for my first 2 years, and then permanently placed through adoption by 2 years old. And I was in a loving home, two-parent home. My parents were considerably older, and they were actually old enough to be my grandparents. So fast forward, I had the best of everything. As an only child, I got a great education, and I didn't want for anything. My parents, I would say, were not necessarily emotionally available. I was not free to talk like I wanted to about adoption. I can recall at least 3 occasions bringing the subject up to my mother, and one time in particular at the age of 12, being told, "Why would you want to do that?" And I just want to say to adoptive parents that might be listening, why wouldn't an adoptee want to know their first mother?
Yes.
So, yeah, I would just bury those feelings, and particularly the thoughts about my relinquishment and my beginnings, like what it was chapter 1.
Yeah.
What was the introduction? Adoptees, we don't start at chapter 2. That we have an introduction. It's just that we don't know what it is.
Yeah. And it sounds like you didn't feel safe to go into that with your mom based on her response to that. You don't need to know that, or why do you even ask? So you just shut that down.
Yeah, she was threatened. I do believe that a lot of times adoptive mothers in particular, they're threatened by the first mother. And I think that was her case. And so, I caged my curiosity. I'm a very curious person. I always have been. And I would be 48 years old. My mother had been deceased for 8 years.
Wow.
Before I said, enough already.
Yeah.
Let's find out about the introduction in chapter 1, So, I embarked upon a search right around the end of 2009, really in 2010, really got going. And at the same time, Illinois was preparing to change its adoption law. So it kind of like coincided, right?
Wow.
Yeah, because I remember calling downstate, Illinois, and asking them, how do I go about finding out what agency? Like, I had all these questions, and they were like, what's the big deal? The law is about to change. You'll get your original birth certificate.
Oh, so you didn't even know that the law was going to be changing. It was just coincidental that you were searching at that same time. Wow.
Absolutely.
Lucky you. Wow.
Yeah. At the same time, I'm thinking, Original birth certificate. What's that?
Oh, you didn't even know.
I didn't even know there was such a thing.
So you were just brand new.
Exactly.
Wow.
And I kind of shelved what they said because I'm thinking there's got to be an adoption decree.
Yeah.
There's got to be an adoption agency, some paperwork,
Mhm.
the original birth certificate is so important, incredibly important to adoptees.
Yeah. Maybe we better tell people what that is, because maybe some people don't know what that is.
Sure. Original birth certificate is the one that's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully it contains your birth mother's name, the date, the time you were born, how much you weighed. And if the father's name is on there, like if your birth mother was married, his name would probably be on there.
Mm-hmm.
In my case, my birth father's name was not on there. But typically, this is a document that is what happened on the day you were born.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Adoptees have an amended birth certificate, which changes things, right?
Mm-hmm.
It looks as if your adoptive parents gave birth to you.
It's so weird. I don't know why they do that.
Yeah.
Why can't they just add 2 more blanks to the document? Just add to it and not replace. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think I have to look at it again, but I think my amended birth certificate changed like where I was born. I was born at Salvation Army Hospital in Chicago, and I'm sure that's not on my amended. I don't know what is, but yeah, these changes were made in the name of secrecy, right?
Yeah. So quote unquote, protect the birth parent.
Yeah.
But a lot of the birth parents, they didn't want it to be private. They probably didn't want it in the first place at all. But the birth parents are saying, hey, I want to know too. Most of them.
Right.
So Illinois sounds like they did the right thing. And they opened up so adult adoptees could access their OBCs or original birth certificates.
Right.
In 2011, right?
Yeah, well, there was a period for the older adoptees born prior to, I'm not sure what year, they went first.
Because their birth parents aren't getting any younger, right?
Exactly. And so I was able to request mine in 2011 and received it in 2012.
Okay.
And was able to see my birth mother's name.
Yeah. And in that video that I watched, the documentary, a simple piece of paper, it was live. You opened it at a party that you gathered people for this express purpose, kind of a reveal party, right? Of your birth certificate, kind of like a gender reveal, but different. And all of your family and friends were there that were so supportive of you. And just the look on your face of seeing your truth, your birth name, your birth mother's name, then the date was the right date that you always knew.
Yes.
Because sometimes that's not the right date either. So that was so beautiful. And I think a lot of people don't even think about their birth certificate. Like, whatever. I only drag it out when I need a new job or whatever. Go get a social security card or something. But adoptees, it's a huge big deal, this simple piece of paper.
Oh, for sure. And I don't know if you saw in the film when they scanned the room, people's mouths were like open. Like nobody really knew what to expect by this gathering. But I felt it was important to have that energy in the room because, if you've had your original birth certificate all your life and you are not an adoptee, you may not get a real sense of what this means.
I also thought it was beautiful. Your son brought it to you. You kind of really thought this whole thing through. And it was so beautiful. He was so loving and just on board with you. And just, can you describe what went through your mind and your heart when you opened that envelope?
Well, first of all, I was nervous. I was so nervous because I didn't know what I was going to find. Yeah. It could have said anything. Yeah. Which also would drive home another point, right? That these things happen, coming out of law enforcement. And I was still a detective at the time. Documents are everything to the nature of an investigation going well.
Yeah.
Like if you're misled any step of the way, it could have dire consequences. People's lives are affected.
Yeah. I think it's so fascinating that you ended up being a detective because adoptees are often detectives of their own lives, for the whole life. But that's really, really what you decided to do for your career. Did you ever put that together when you started in the police force? And did you realize that's what you were doing or it just kind of happened?
When you asked me that yesterday, I've been sitting with that. Like, could I? Was that a subconscious thing? But my thinking is it really didn't have anything to do with being an adopted person. It had to do with, well, I guess everything has to do with being an adopted person, but I just recognize what I enjoy.
Yeah.
The things I like. And I would recommend anybody, I've said it on an episode of my podcast, if you can identify what you like early in life,
yes,
then you're well ahead, because I did know at a very young age what I liked. I love driving fast. I love being outdoors. I like people. They fascinate me. I love mysteries. I like solving them. I like all of that. And I remember asking someone, guess what I did for a living? And I named those things, and he immediately said, detective.
No.
So,
wow.
Yeah, that's how I put it. But yeah, I think adoptees, we are detectives.
Yeah, you have to be, unless you're one of the lucky ones, maybe younger, coming up now, adoptees that are in completely open adoptions. But, your generation, everything was false. Your name got changed, right?
Right.
So you had a different name, and you were just expected to just pretend like this has always been your family.
Yeah.
The blank slate model, right?
Exactly.
And that's just so impossible. You're not a blank slate. You had a chapter 1, like you said.
Right. But what I will say about that original birth certificate, going back to your question, seeing it for the first time, I remember when I saw Bonnie Lynn Upshaw, I was like, well, that was the truth, because I had been called Bonnie, still am called Bonnie by many circles, because the social worker that my parents had highly suggested, because I had been called Bonnie for 2 years, to keep the name, sort of like a nickname, introduce this new name of Jennifer, but Bonnie is what she's known for long enough that it's important to keep it. So when I saw that name, I was like, I think this document is, that's true.
Oh, that would confirm. Now, why did your family change your name?
Well, what my mother used to tell me is, because my middle name is Dyan, spelled Dyan. So Dyan Cannon, an actress, was a favorite of my mother's.
Okay.
And she had a daughter, I think Jennifer, her daughter, Dyan Cannon's daughter, Jennifer. And by the way, her father is Cary Grant. So,
okay.
So Jennifer was born, I think, either a year before me or a year after me. She existed in the world during the time that I became a Ghoston. And my mother liked Dyan Cannon and named me Jennifer. Dyan.
And Jennifer was a very popular name at that time.
It still is. I must meet about 10 Jennifers in a week.
Yeah. Yep. I think you're around my same age. And man, Jennifer was a really common name. So, but I wonder, did you ever ask your mom, why wasn't Bonnie just okay? I see that they liked, this celebrity, that's cool, but why did they need to change it? I'm asking this, and I changed my son's name, so I'm not judging anybody.
Right. Yeah.
Just curious.
That's like $1 million question. I don't know the need to change a name. To answer your question, I think that, and I'm just guessing, I don't remember having a conversation with my mother about that, but I'm thinking that she just wanted things to be the way she wanted them. She did not want what someone else had done.
Right. You want to start fresh. Like when you get a new house, you want to put a fresh, paint on the walls and new carpeting.
But it is an adoptee thing with me, because when I rescued my dog and they said her name was Diva, I thought, I wouldn't dare change. I mean, she's 2 years old. I think it activated something in me, because she was 2 years old. And I was like, there's no way I would change her name.
Oh, I bet that really hit close to home.
That's an adoptee thing. I just thought I'd throw that out there. I wouldn't change name. I'm real sensitive about that.
Yeah, I feel bad that I changed Joey's name. We gave him an American name, but his Japanese name, and actually, I think the hospital that was taking care of him changed his name again. So I think his birth mother named him something. The agency changed it again, and then we changed it again. So poor thing.
Well, why did you change it?
Because we wanted him to have an American name. We didn't want him to be bullied or ostracized because of his name. It was very uncommon. It wasn't like a Japanese name anyone would even really know. But that's not a good reason. And he was bullied anyway. So he was bullied for being Asian. You can't really hide that part. So whatever your name is. So I wish I wouldn't have changed his name. And adoptive parents, if you're listening, or if you haven't adopted yet, or if you're thinking about it or fostering or something, the name is really important. And it's not ours to do. It's not ours to change. I think people can disagree with us, but I wish I wouldn't have.
Yeah, I can really appreciate that you own things. I've listened to your episodes and I know that the whole gotcha day,
Yeah.
you're sorry you did that.
Yes.
Like I can really appreciate you owning where you took turns that you maybe shouldn't have in your opinion. Because we're growing. We're all growing. We're learning, hopefully growing as we're going along. So yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I figure, I can either just sit and feel guilty and just beat myself up, which I do. Believe me, I do that. But I'd rather just tell everybody else, don't do this. Don't do what I did. Do better. That's what I'm choosing to do with that, because it doesn't help anyone else if I just sit in my own guilt. And so I'm trying to help other people. So, I hope that people share this podcast in general and your podcast too, with people who are not in the adoption world, because these kinds of ideas, gotcha day, which we did at Joey's school, I brought it to his classroom, for crying out loud. But maybe if there's a teacher out there that hears an episode like this and goes, you know what? Maybe we should think this through a different way. The more people that can get this information, the better. And I just really do hope that other adoptive parents can do better than I did. So I hope to be that information for people.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Yeah. And I think that Paul Sunderland, and you and I've talked about
I love him.
Yes, that work that he has done, it's on the YouTube video, when he talks about you can't say adoption without saying relinquishment. And I think that's a really good place to start, because when you put relinquishment and adoption, then it paints the total picture. Adoption is just part of the picture, as he stated. And I think if more and more members of the community start saying it that way, particularly adoptive parents, then Gotcha Day will take on a different meaning, because as you said, and I've heard other adoptive parents say, it's a great day for adoptive parents.
That's right. It was our party. It was really for me.
Right.
It was not a happy day for him at all.
Exactly. So the relinquishment piece acknowledges the adoptee.
Yeah. And adoptive parents, it can help you realize, okay, this isn't all about me. This is definitely not about me. It gives adoptive parents extra layers of responsibilities. Okay, so I'm getting this kid that's traumatized before I even met him, before I even got his name from the agency. And what then is my job to help him find his healing path in that and not add to the trauma. If we adoptive parents can just try not to add worse things. To add to the pain. So, oh gosh. Well, thank you I appreciate you saying that. You appreciate me telling everyone all those stuff I've messed up, because it's not easy to do. And I am dedicated to doing it though. And I appreciate it when adoptees appreciate it.
Well, you're being vulnerable. Yeah.
Yeah. And not everybody has to do this out in public like this, but maybe people can talk to their girlfriend or to their mother about things like this and just open up the conversation like we're doing. I think that's really great. Well, I met you in person a couple of weeks ago, and it was so fun because I've listened to your podcast, most of the episodes, and your voice is so iconic and just so gentle and soothing. And you have just such a calm demeanor. And I was so happy to meet the actual person behind the voice. It's so weird to have an idea of what people look like, and then you meet them in person. So it was so cool.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. That was just an amazing weekend.
So we met at the Untangling Our Roots Summit, which was an adoption kind of themed conference, my first one ever. And this was put on by NAP, which is the National Association of Adoptees and Parents, and also another group called Right to Know, which I had never heard of before this conference. And they work with people that are donor conceived and have other kind of DNA surprises. Like they take a 23andMe test and realize, oh crap, that wasn't my dad this whole time, and that I thought was my dad. So there's a bunch of those people around. They're called NPEs, or not parent expected or non-paternal event. So there were these DCPs, donor conceived people, and NPEs, not parent expected, and then a bunch of adoptees. and then 2 adoptive parents.
It was just 2 of you there?
I don't know. I only ran into one other one. There are a couple of others that are also adoptees, but I think that's slightly different. Adoptees and adoptive parents in one person. But there was one other adoptive mom that I connected with. Maybe there were a few more, but we were definitely in the minority. It was so great to meet you and so many other people I've interviewed or heard or read. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful time in Louisville, Kentucky, which I never would have gone to otherwise. You're pretty close there. You live in Nashville, so you were pretty close.
Yeah, I was a 3-hour drive from there. So it was, easy breezy for me.
So what was it like for you? You've been to a bunch of adoption conferences because I've heard you talk about how important live events are for you. How was this one for you? How did it differ?
Well, first of all, it was extraordinary because most of the people that were there, I had met them online, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've been talking back and forth 1 year, some people 2 years, and just in Zoom spaces. But yet I felt like I knew them. And that there's still quite a few people out there. I feel like I've been to their home and they've been to mine, and I still haven't met them in person.
I know, it's so weird.
So that was the first thing. And that just was so exciting. So I drove in with an adoptee. She hung out with me a couple of days and we had a great time here in Nashville. So when we get to Louisville, I remember the first adoptee that we saw, and I had actually met her in person before, but the adoptee I was with hadn't. And the adoptee just broke down in tears. It was just so, tears of joy, right? To finally be able to hug one another and just be together was just nothing I've experienced like that. So yeah, I have been to many conferences through the years, and they've all been wonderful for me for different reasons. I think untangling our roots was something next level because it was a collaboration. Like I'm excited about fellowshipping with NPEs and donor conceived. Like I do believe there's strength in numbers. And I think as I learn more about I guess, is it an overlap? Maybe another word, the interconnection that all of these groups have is quite striking to me. Like they're dealing with the secrecy, they're dealing with the deceit, they're dealing with the shame, overcoming shame, and trying to get information. Like their original birth certificates, they're not quite right.
Yeah.
So that element, I'm just interested in us doing more of that. I know you recently had Cindy on your show.
Yeah.
And Hyreth Hope and Healing does 3 retreats every year. And I get to be a part of the one in October.
Oh, nice.
And I'm like, there it goes again, right? Things are colliding, right? In a beautiful way where I get to be a part of these other groups so that we can, what's the word they use? Togetherness heals. I love it.
Yes. Yes. I felt that so strongly, and that everybody was there to learn and grow. I was a little afraid when I went that I would get harassed, kind of like I do online sometimes by adoptees, other adoptive parents. I mean, people like to beat up on adoptive parents, which I understand. They probably have a right to. They probably need to. But everybody was just so open. And even though we were talking about really sad stuff most of the time, people were still just joyful to be together. Did you notice that? It's like, God, this is sad. And everyone was smiling and hugging.
Absolutely.
It was like this strange dichotomy happening.
Yeah. It was wonderful that NAP and
Right to Know?
Right to Know. Yes, right. Because I hadn't heard of Right to Know before
me neither,
this either. But NAP I've been familiar with for a while. Plus, most of the members were at conferences that I attended through the years, over the last 10 years. But yeah, Right to Know and NAP brought all of us together. I know that was not easy to do, to plan this. And yeah, I think people appreciated doing it that way, bringing us all together to learn, to meet new people, and to experience healing together.
Yes, it was such a vibe of healing, and it wasn't just one gripe session after another and anger. And I mean, certainly there was anger and there's a lot of sadness, but they even plugged in every day. They had one whole session was either therapeutic or creative or some sort of processing. It wasn't just lecture. They gave us one usually in the afternoon to say, okay, let's go do some writing, or let's go do some Tai Chi. And they even had a whole therapy room with volunteer therapists that rotated. So if you got triggered, you needed to go talk to a therapist right now. There you go, for free. That was amazing.
Did you take advantage of that?
I did not.
Okay. I didn't either.
I didn't feel triggered, really. It was kind of overwhelming, but I didn't feel the need. But I would have.
I wish I had, because I was overstimulated at times.
Yeah. I had to take some times out and just, I've gone to a bunch of music conferences, and I know with those, I'm so much of an introvert. I can't be together with a lot of people for a long time. I need to like go away sometimes. So I took care of myself that way. But I just thought that the organizers, Marcy, Jennifer, and Kara, I'll shout you guys out, and Beth, the other Beth, just did an awesome job of balancing all of these things and taking care of the language too. They were making sure we all had language around. Everyone knew what DCP and NPE meant. And we always said adoptees, DCPs, and NPEs, and not just adoptees, for instance. We just tried to include everybody. And it was really, really beautiful, and just a sign of the way things are going to be. Oh, I wanted to just also highlight that Leslie Pate McKinnon was there, who has been on our show and is a dear friend of mine. And she had this idea a long time ago,
right,
to put these groups together. So that was amazing to meet her too.
Oh, you had never met Leslie?
No, not in person.
Yeah, we go back to the conferences in the past that I've been to. And I know you said she checked on you.
Yes.
And that's great.
Right away. I'd been there for maybe an hour, and she saw me and she gave me a hug and she said, "How are you?" The kind where they really want to know, not just like, "How are you?" but like, "How are you?" I'm like, "I'm fine. I'm feeling okay. I'm feeling safe." And she goes, "Good. And you just let me know if anyone bugs you." But no one did. Everyone was very nice.
That's good. She checked on me too. She's that kind of person. That's just who she is.
She's just a gem.
Yeah.
We love you, Leslie. Yeah, she's amazing. And I went to a webinar, or not a webinar. It was in person, a workshop. Oh my gosh, about genetic attraction, which I'm going to do a whole episode about. It was so important that donor conceived and adoptees and NPEs, they don't know who they're related to. And sometimes they accidentally get with someone. I mean, you hear in the news, sometimes these people marry their brother or their cousin, they don't know because their DNA is not clear. But sometimes when you're in reunion, you connect with someone. And the thing that can happen when you have this DNA connection, this biological connection, is there can be a romantic or a sexual attraction there. And that can, really throw people off or really get people into big trouble. So that was fascinating. So I'm going to be putting an episode together about that, because I think it's an extremely important topic for adoptees to know. Was there any part of the whole conference that really stood out for you that was like, whoa, like a big earthquake for you?
I did attend a workshop that really was so good for podcasters.
Yes.
There was a panel of podcasters, and I so enjoyed that workshop. But I found that the one-on-ones are just so special to me. Like I talked to Greg Gentry outside of the big room, and hugged. Like that was so important to me, to be able to hug an adoptee that I've talked to that I just find is just a lovely person, and do just the like off to the side chats. And I've always really been that way. I'm a loner, and I do kind of like what you were saying earlier, kind of click with me because I'm an Enneagram 5. I don't know if you know what you are, but
I'm not good at the Enneagram yet. I need to do that. I'm curious about it.
Yeah, I'm still so curious, but I definitely have qualities of a 5. And so we tend to want to come away from a lot of energy. Yeah, that's what I like the most, the one-on-ones. And then too, I've been to a lot of conferences. So met a lot of people who this was their first conference. And I think my first conference in 2011 was in Orlando, Florida. And yeah, I was at all the workshops. I was sitting in all the rooms, and I was soaking up the information. And so I think I've kind of evolved to just the one-on-ones more than anything.
Yeah, that's so important. And those are the things that they don't list in the brochure, But that networking and heart-to-heart moments, you just can't get on Zoom. I'm sorry. Zoom's great. And, we're able to do this and so many great things on Zoom, but the in-person is so critical. And I know it costs money and it costs time, and it's no small task to go to Louisville for 4 days, I'll tell you.
Right.
But so worth it. And I just feel so much more connected. I came away from there just more dedicated than ever to do this work and to help other adoptive parents and to just elevate adoptees' voices after hearing story after story after story of just pain. There's just a lot of pain.
Why do you think more adoptive parents don't go to these conferences?
I don't know. I was really surprised that there weren't more, because I know NAP is really geared toward helping adoptive parents. I mean, it's right in their name. I don't know. I think maybe they think they don't need it. I don't know.
Even listening to podcasts, listening to adoptees' lived experience, I just find it seems as if adoptive parents shy away from listening to us. I mean, you're like a big exception, you know?
I think it's very painful. And I feel that too. Like, oh crap, I've been doing stuff wrong. Or, oh crap, my son is in pain because of something I did. Adoptive parents have to reckon with that, and to put ourselves in spaces where we're going to hear a lot of pain it's a lot. But, I think that that's where the healing is. And I think that even though we adoptive parents, most of us, we're not adopted, we have a lot of growth we can be doing too in looking at this stuff. Why is this so triggering for me? Why am I backing away from this pain? What is it about this that makes me just want to run away as far as possible and say, no, la, 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 la. Everything's fine. My kid is fine. They're fine. They don't say anything about their adoption. They're fine. So I think that when adoptive parents feel that wanting to run or wanting to fight, either fight or flight, some adoptive parents get in the ring and go, punch, punch, punch. And they beat up the adoptees saying, oh, you're not traumatized. You should be lucky, all that kind of stuff that you guys get sometimes. Those are trauma responses. And those are ways that we are reacting to a very painful situation that we're hearing. So I don't know. That's why I encourage adoptive parents to just listen. You don't even have to do anything. Just listen. The first podcast my adoption therapist told me to listen to was Adoptees On, which is a wonderful podcast with Haley Redkey. And it's just like biographies, basically. She just opens it up and all you do is just hear adoptee stories. And that was extremely helpful for me at that time. And your podcast is very similar in that you just give adoptees the space and time. I love these podcasts because it's long form. It's not like little clips and little TikTok-y things. It's long form. You can really hear what is going on. So,
well, first of all, thank you for the kind words about my podcast.
Yes.
Yeah, I know there's a need for adoptees to be seen and heard. And so it's so important. And right now I'm thinking of Adoptee Voices, the writing group that I co-facilitate that was created by Sarah Easterly. Kate Murphy and Alice Stevens also co-facilitate. And one of the things, it's probably one of the most meaningful things that I've done alongside the podcast for the last 2 years. It is so healing for the listener and the storyteller. And it's just created space for adoptees only, where you can kind of let down your guards, because we as adoptees, many times we present very well in mixed company. Okay. Because we don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers. I think that's back to the adoptee piece.
Yeah, you've learned that. Sorry.
Yeah, we've learned that very well, because I know I can present very well.
Yeah.
Because it is tricky when you're in with all members of the constellation as an adoptee to really get what you're feeling and thinking out of your system. And so this space of writing, by the way, I think is just one of those big tools in the box that can be helpful in healing. And so, adoptees are able to write their words, read their words, because they hear it, but then we get to hear it. Like it's just amazing, because I do believe, and this was Mary Herbert, she's on Instagram at Because Adoption. I like to shout her out because she said it best, that storytelling is healing for the listener and the storyteller. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I love that. I totally agree with you. And by raising adoptees, like what you're doing on your podcast, you amplify adoptee voices. So it's helping them get their story out, and it's helping us. And I bet it helps other adoptees tremendously to hear, oh my God, I'm not the only one. Or I recognize that in you. Yeah. It helps everybody.
Yeah. Because everybody wants to be seen and heard at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Everybody.
Yes.
It's just that we've been silenced as adoptees for far too long.
Yes. It's coming out though. I think your generation and the younger generations particularly are like, no more. It's enough of this garbage where we're trying to hide. And there's nothing to hide, and our story is valid and needs to be heard. So I ask everyone to just listen. Just listen. You don't have to do anything. Just listen. And it will inform you, and it will inform your choices. The next time your adopted child triggers you, you'll be like, oh yeah, I heard that episode. And or you won't even do it consciously, but it will just inform your future decisions.
Yeah.
Just listen. So what voices are we missing in the adoption conversation? Are there certain types of people, demographics, or are there certain stories that are still missing, in your opinion?
I think that same race Black domestic adoptees are not well represented. And I tell you what led me to this belief, outside of going to conferences and it being just a handful of Black people
in general, right?
In a sea of white smiles.
Yes, I know. I noticed that.
But
too.
what led me to it is because I was running into adoptees, white adoptees, that assumed I was transracial or interracial.
Right.
Meaning I had white parents. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, why would they think that? Because they really were hearing voices of the interracial adoptee. And then it occurred, well, that must mean that same race Black domestic adoptees, they're not hearing from us enough, right?
Yeah. I admit that whenever I see a person of color, I just figure they were adopted by white people, because I think white people are by far the most dominant race of people that are the adopters. So I guess we just assume, which is never a good idea to assume. But I agree with you. I probably always think that's my first thought is transracial when you see a person of color, but that's definitely not always the case. And I think that's very important for us to understand. And I love that you are highlighting that. How many other people of color do you know that were also adopted by the same race?
Lots and lots and lots.
Really? Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting.
Do you think it's the transracial piece adds an extra layer? And so those people are, it's not like a trauma Olympics, but even more traumatized or even more disconnected because they were disconnected from their race. And so it just, they're louder or just.
Well, yeah, that's a really good question. And I'll answer it like this. They can't fit in, so to speak. Yeah. They can't go anywhere and not be an adoptee. You know, they're sitting at the table in the restaurant with all white family members. Most people are going to say, you know, this is an adopted child.
Yeah, it's pretty clear usually.
Right. Whereas I can go and I pretty much look like my parents and my cousins and my adoptive family. So that may never even come up that I'm adoptee.
Okay.
In fact, I look so much like my cousins that outsiders would say, oh, I knew that was your cousin. You all look alike. Well, we're not biologically related, but, you know, I didn't stand out as transracial or interracial adoptees. They really stand out. And they really have an added layer of trauma in the sense of not having their culture, you know, being inundated with white culture and not Black culture. Have you ever watched This Is Us?
Oh, yeah.
And Randall, he's an interracial adoptee.
Yes.
And there's a scene early on in the series where a Black family, and I love the way they wrote this, a Black family makes it known to his adoptive mom, you got to let him come over and hang out with us.
Yes.
Right? And most of the Black interracial adoptees that I know that were raised by white parents, it would be college where they had to be intentional to go to a Black university and learn about being a Black person. Like the movies and the things you do, we do different things. Our culture is different. And all Black people aren't alike.
Right. It's not monolithic.
So they have that other piece.
Yes. So do you feel a difference? Like, can you spot a Black person that was raised by white people? like, can you tell? Is that rude to ask? I don't know.
That question, I don't think anybody's asked me that. What's coming up for me is that sometimes word choice in a conversation will make me pause and get curious. Yes. A lot of times, though, I know Black people spend a lot of money educating their kids. There's some very well-educated Black people, right? So you may not know. I'm thinking of Michelle Obama because we're about the same age. And I know the high school she went to, she's from Chicago. So after reading her book, I'm like, oh, yeah, I did that.
Nice.
She comes off as being raised by Black people, but she was well-educated and she went on to be a lawyer, right? Like she went to one of the best universities in the country. So I don't know. That's an interesting question.
I just wondered if transracially adopted Black people, because from what I hear, and this is my son's situation too, he doesn't feel Asian or American. Like it's like in this no man's land. So I wonder if same race adoptees feel more connected to their culture and, just feel like they have that one less.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I can answer that real quick. Absolutely. I didn't miss a beat.
Okay.
On what it means to be Black.
Yeah. You didn't have to, have parents learn how to tell you, how to function in society and how to be careful around certain things. And your parents obviously already knew that. And so they didn't have to go to classes or take, luckily there are classes, but
they knew that. I mean, my mother was born in 24, my dad in 16. So they went through the whole discrimination piece.
Oh my gosh.
In the South and everything.
Wow.
Jim Crow and civil rights movement. Like they could recall all of that.
So you didn't have to read books about this. You just had lived experience.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Do you feel, I know adoptees hate it when you ask if they feel grateful, but do you feel grateful that you were adopted by Black people?
Well, yes. And the parents that I have, I'm thankful to have had the parents that I had.
Yeah.
Yes. Both are deceased now, but yeah. And I have really been deeply saddened talking to Black adoptees raised by white parents when they say they don't know the movies, they don't know the things like music. They had to learn all of that upon adulthood. And then the whole racial piece, discrimination and racism, and the police, right?
Yes.
They don't have a clue. I just talked to an adoptee that said that the police were getting ready to stop him. He was the only Black kid in the group. And I guess they were teenagers and they took off running and they said, we don't have to worry about anything. We don't have to worry. Isaac's been a guest on my show.
Yeah. Okay,
Isaac's the only one that's going to get stopped. And in that moment, he thought, they know my situation out here and I don't even know it.
Wow.
These white teenagers.
God, it puts him at such risk too. So the not knowing and the not being prepared. Wow. Okay. So white parents of Black kids, you have a lot of work to do.
Tons and tons of work.
So much. And tell me if I'm wrong, because I try to let transracial adoptive parents know that it's so important to get them in touch and in themselves, the parents in touch with people in their child's community.
Yes.
Like deeply, like move if you have to. Find their community because that is now your family's community too. And you just need to immerse yourself so that child does not feel isolated. Is that the right thing to tell adoptive parents?
Yeah, that's one of the things I would suggest. And remember that all Black people aren't the same. So don't have just this one Black family,
Right.
I think that's important.
It needs to be broad and deep.
Yeah. That's important.
There's so much. I appreciate you talking through this with me. I'm so scared that I'm going to say something wrong. I'm sure I do say stuff wrong, and I hope that you'll correct me if I totally goof it up. But I think that it's important for, us white people to really work on this. And I'm also aware I don't want to just use your emotional labor to do this, but white people, we have a lot of work to do. Go read some stuff and go take some classes and dig in so we can be better for our Black adopted kids, for our Black friends, for our Black peers, and just our culture. Geez, we had a lot of work to do.
I think one really good place to start is reading that book, White Fragility.
Oh, that was so good.
And I know you told me you were aware
of
that. Yeah, I think she hit it out of the ballpark.
It is such a good book. Every white person, you got to read that book. And it's hard. It's kind of like reading The Primal Wound. It's hard, but you got to dig into the hard. This is no time to be laying back and just going, oh, well, somebody else is going to be taking care of this. We all got to step up.
And what I love that you do, Beth, is you say, help me and correct me and let me know what may have sounded better or what should have been stated differently. Mm-hmm. And I feel that same way because I get it wrong too. And when I do, I would prefer someone tell me, hey, this is a better way.
There's a better way to say that.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I agree. We're all just trying to do our best. And I have to just assume everyone has good intentions, but sometimes we'll goof it up and we have to go past just intending to do good. We have to really actually go do the work. So, well, we better wrap this up. I so appreciate your conversation with me, Jennifer. I'm so glad I know you and I admire your work so much. And I really appreciate you being on Unraveling Adoption.
I admire you too, Beth. A pleasure to be on here. This was a lovely conversation.
Thank you. And I will put a link to your podcast, Once Upon a Time in Adoptee Land. Is there any other website or anything else you want me to include?
So Jennifer Dyan Ghoston, all one word, .com is my website.
Okay.
And a link to my book. It's on Amazon. But actually you can get it through my website. I can autograph it for you if you want.
Oh, nice. All right. I'll put all those links in the show notes. So you have lots of different ways to get a hold of Jennifer. And I'll put your writing group in there as well.
Oh, Adoptee Voices. That would be great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's for adult adoptees that want to work on their writing and getting their story out. That's so great. All right. I'll put all that in the notes. So everybody look down below or to the side and find the notes and you'll find all those links. And go ahead and find Unraveling Adoption too. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And our website is unravelingadoption.com. We do have a Patreon if anyone would like to support the content we create. We do have commercial-free podcasts and all sorts of free resources. But the way that it helps us get through this is with some Patreon supporters. It's as little as $5 a month. You can support us. It's patreon.com/unravelingadoption. And I'm very excited and grateful to announce that we have a couple new Patreon supporters, including Victoria Holmes and Sharon Carton. Thank you so much for your support. And last, if you're an adoptive or foster or kinship parent and want to dig into this stuff with me and get some support and resources, find information about our group called Aptitude. And you can find that at unravelingadoption.com/aptitude. And all those links are below as well. All right. Thank you again, Jennifer, for being here. And Jennifer and I want you all to stay safe.